Well, so I have a first question, man, if you don't mind, because I mean, to your backdrop, right? We're similar, right? 10 years into it. And I think to go back that far and be in this area, there's got to be some weird backstory, right? Because I mean, there was a pretty small group. The words didn't even exist back then, right? I mean,
Right.
I don't think I started hearing fintech till at least 2012 or so,
They
so
started
much
talking
less
about
reg
bass.
tech, right?
They talked about bass. I grabbed my fishing pole.
Yeah, man. So, yeah. So how did everything get started, man? Because you guys been around what 15 years or so?
Yeah, 15 years. In the first 5 years, we were like in a totally different arena. We were a different business. So we started as a media company. So a digital media company that was um, that was pulling together online publishers and online advertisers and helping them find each other. And we set up a business model that was performance-based marketing. So helping to acquire leads for perhaps mortgage companies or wealth management companies, or even acquire customers for subscription businesses like Netflix. And what we realized while we were a couple years in on that is that there was a lot of fraud in that space and a real lack of transparency. Big surprise, right?
Right.
We all figured it out
No,
now.
you got my wheels spinning, man, because I'm thinking about how many times we built new business lines and you find problems trying to service new business lines. You're like, it's a great business solving our own problem, right?
Yeah,
So,
totally. So we had this media business. It was doing well. It was profitable. Um, it was it's not the best business to run as an operator because everything is so transactional, right? So if you don't keep picking up the phones and closing new deals, like your business goes down. So there were some, kind of less interesting things as an operator. But really we saw this fraud and compliance issue. And what we started to do was say, well, how can we prove that our traffic is higher quality, less fraudulent, more compliant than all the other ad networks? So we developed a little JavaScript that we would embed on the landing page that would capture where the user came from, what website they were on before they ended up there. And the idea was that we could prove via screenshots in a report to all of our advertisers that these were not people filling out a form to win a free iPad. They were not, bogus. They actually showed some high intent. Maybe it was clicking on a paid search ad. Maybe it was reading a financial services blog. So we would sell the media with the proof that it was high quality. And that's when things started to change in our mind about like why that was valuable.
yeah.
And what we heard from our customers was that they were giving that report to their compliance department, especially in the regulated industry, especially with the banks and the mortgage lenders. And we said, well, why do they care? Like, you're a customer, you're the marketing company. And they said, well, they care because of all these rules. And we're like, what rules? And we read about the CFPB for the first time 10 years ago. And we said, wow, this is interesting. And then we went and we talked to some of those folks in the compliance department at the banks and at the mortgage lenders. And, typically they would take me to the dark corners of the office, and there'd be a bunch of people with multiple screens trying to manually find their ads out on NerdWallet or Credit Karma. And that's when we started to say, wow, we could probably automate some of that searching and help them get that same screenshot that we deliver and let them have, a single version of the truth when they need to
Awesome.
help their partners get compliant. That's when the pivot happened, and that's when the business kind of became what it is
People
today.
say you're a reg tech company, and you're like, we are.
Yeah, man. That's how all the best stuff happens. I love it.
We were here before it was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something that I think is so interesting in all this is that, fast forward and today, and you're looking at all kinds of rules and regulations and potentially a hell of a lot more that, should be
that's a
kind of
good question.
scary, right? Because if you said, hey, I'm going to go to use Google or whatever to do some advertisement on a particular card or whatever. Right now, you're probably in a safe zone.
Yeah, pretty great at the moment.
Coming forward to a theater near you, it may be not cool to do those kind of things. And so these rule changes that are happening quickly, finally, and the dynamics of all this. So really kind of gets us back to a cart and horse, right? So is it better to really focus on the compliance side from the bank side? and let's talk about Bass for a second. If they've got FinTech brands underneath them, do we want to work there? Or do you want to work at the Bass Bank level, or both? Or how do you go about that?
Well, and all the while it's the consumer we're worried about.
Right.
This is a messy question, right? I think the regulators are asking the same question.
Yeah.
Right. There's multiple constituents, right? That if you're, in this sector, you need to be aware of and thoughtful of. So, I mean, for us, we kind of follow, I guess, where the need is the greatest. And what's happened is that's what started maybe traditionally is just the regulated entity, right? Where the community bank is, or the partner bank, or the lender, has now expanded to the fintechs themselves. So I think it was April last year, right? The CFPB and others have said, no, like we're gonna use this power to also regulate anyone that's touching consumers. So, and it's not to say that just last year we started working with fintechs. We've had fintechs as customers for a long time who believe that, a good compliance practice is good business. So we're really helping kind of both sides of that, all while keeping in mind the at-risk consumer, right? And helping make sure that they're getting a square deal, they know what they're signing up for. It really kind of boils down. It can get kind of complicated when you get knee deep in the regs, but it's really truth in advertising laws, right?
Good call.
Yeah, ultimately, when we, guys, one of the things that we're kind of talking about today is just like outbound campaigns, and accessing user information without their, authorization to do so, right? And basic, like in a bank, people come in every week or whatever, you get this many accounts a month, and
it's a little different when they walk into your bank.
Right. And in FinTech, I mean, they'll do advertising campaigns that are, thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands, and
lots of data points.
Right. And so did we break a rule doing that? Did we do some unfair trade practice along the way? Right. And so there's a lot of things that get into play here. And it was kind of the Wild West for a while. And now it's a little bit more like the regulators have figured out that this may not be so cool. And so in the, steps Alex and his company saying, this is what we do.
When somebody I'd love to get your thoughts on, I feel like this whole sort of open banking, as we call it, open data, right? This conversation has definitely spawned a lot in your arena, right, to this topic. And I mean, if you think about it, look, we see this a lot between banks and service providers. Who owns the data, right? Is it the bank that owns the data? Is it the core, right? And it's like, maybe it's probably the consumer. I don't know, right? And so then you think about working with third parties. And I mean, what are we seeing these days? The average consumer has like 9 different financial apps on their phone.
Right.
Well, who owns the data, right? And this question of, does the consumer own the data? And now how do we share it? Everything kind of comes into play. And so I feel like that conversation has to have sparked a lot in your arena. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. That it's really coming down to the ownership. Like, who owns the responsibility? Who owns the data?
I have no idea.
I think it's everybody, right?
Yeah.
At least on the responsibility for the messaging, the sales and marketing compliance, right? Because if you are the partner bank, you have the charter and you're growing your business through these fintech partnerships, and you're offering a few different key services, and one of them is your expertise and access to presumably a best-in-class compliance management system, right? And you're saying to your fintech partner, like, hey, I need you to be aware of this, but I can help you navigate. This is what we do. We've built process around this. Fintech partner, what I need you to do is follow our guidelines, our instructions, which come from the regulator, but also be really good at building product, be really good at expanding kind of who's included in this financial service, and be a great marketing machine, but do it in a compliant way. So I think that's
easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
Easier said than done, for sure.
Yeah.
And then you brought up,
trying to run the business, and they're trying to do what they're trying to do, and they're not necessarily reg experts. Then you got all the burden of that on the institution itself.
Well, it's one thing to check it once versus an ongoing view of the program, right?
Right. Well, it's the scale issue, right, that Dave was mentioning. So, like, you may be able to handle it with your team with 1 or 2 partners and still have pretty decent turnaround times, but as soon as that gets to 5 or 10, or in some cases hundreds of partners, you just can't scale that with people and be on top of all your fintech partners, and not just the one time, but the ongoing monitoring. And that's something that our technology does. It's daily monitoring, near real-time analytics, and it's omni-channel. So we've been talking about the web a little bit in this conversation, but we have 6 channels of coverage. So we have web, we have contact center, where we'll provide surveillance and remediation on phone calls in the contact center for collections or sales. We do it via email, on the email communication channel, messaging. Social has been a big deal of recent. So if you have independent agents or partners that are leveraging all the social platforms to drive customers, we can help our customers monitor all of those for these issues. And then the last channel that we launched, which has been of particular interest in the banking as a service ecosystem, is document review. So this is where a partner bank, is getting submissions of documents from their partners, and we're able to deliver automated verdicts on those documents and say, hey, this might be a UDAP violation, or you've got an outdated APR here, to assist in that manual review, so that the bank partners can uphold their, kind of commitment to their fintech partners. And the fintech partners get better over time because people respect what you inspect. Right. So it just kind of raises the bar there.
One of the things I think that we make a real point of when we speak is that try to make, let's take, so like, what's a core? To a payments guy, it's one thing, it's a ledger, right? And to a Fiserv, it's a whole different story, right? Mm-hmm. And so you've got vocabulary problems that come into everything that we talk about in this space. And so what we try to do is try to just kind of make horse sense, use easier words for people to follow. And really what we're talking about in this situation here, we talk about mirroring, right? So if you've got a compliance team at your bank, you need to have a mirrored compliance team at each fintech brand program. And then if you say, what's a best practice? Well, if you go really wide, you need to go really slow. Right. But if you stay in a particular vertical, you can go a little bit faster because you have expertise in that area, right? And then we have change monitoring because some of the things that you're talking about. So
such a tough one.
These little topics that we talk about, mirroring and change management and pizza and compliance, like you only need these pieces if you're only focused on that thing. All these little silly things that we talk about, that's what you're actually employing at both the BAS bank and at the fintech at a granular level. And what really makes this so cool for all of us is that we all see this, play tic-tac-toe long enough and you're like, hell, I can't beat this thing, right? Okay. Well, if you kind of just take this hand and play it out, if you make it invisible for a BAS institution and a fintech brand and a platform and a whatever to actually see where the consumer is at, or how many they've reaggregated that in a different way, then think about what a regulator has to go through to try to regulate and find how to protect that consumer. And you've virtually made it impossible. Okay. That's when we talk about the number of hops between the consumer and the financial charter.
This is where I was going to go.
And you actually filled that gap perfectly.
When I kind of see, Alex, a little bit of I think we've all done this to a certain degree, but over time, a little bit of a history of moving from kind of the consumer marketing side, right? And then hopping up to let's call it a fintech program, and then hopping up to a charter and a BAS bank, right? Kind of inching closer to the regulation and to the consumer, which really feels like the same thing I think we're all trying to do. It's what the regulators are trying to do, right? And the more parties involved, I guess the foggier things get. Yep. Right. And so we're seeing a lot of that, right? And this question of how to manage that, and do we need to keep things tight, right? And I think people like you actually proved to me that we can get a little bit broader, right? You've got visibility, and as long as you can provide that back, everybody's cool, right?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think we're part of the solution, right? Especially on this sales and marketing use case. There are a lot of interesting things you guys both said there. So like third parties, Tanner, right? Like there's more and more third parties involved. There's so many jumps, right? And what is a CMO thinking about doing, right? When they draw the pie chart on their whiteboard, they're like, all right, we're gonna hit our goals. 25% of the pie is going to be through our direct or demand gen efforts, right. And then 10% is going to come from our partners right? Whether it's co-branded cards with airlines or retailers. And then another, 30% is going to come from web affiliates where we're paying them a commission. And it just, in order for the CMO to do their job, they've got to enlist these third parties. So how do you get reasonable oversight over that? And that's what we can help with. And then to Dave's point earlier, mirroring. So I think the way we speak to that is we've built these rule sets that are product specific. Now, every bank and every fintech is going to have some rules that are custom to their offering. But if you're a prepaid debit card, right, or you're a deposit account, you can get started with our out of the box deposit rule set, which probably has 500 rules that are influenced by the regs, but also what we've seen in the market, like where shady players might go if you're not careful, and what sort of tactics might lead to a higher conversion on a paid ad or an email. And you can from day one out of the box, you can take those rules and put them against, the documents that are coming in from your partners, phone calls from your contact center, chat messages. And then that rule set is different once you launch that second product or you bring on that next fintech partner, right? And you can go a little faster if you're staying within, the product because you get expertise. But how do you also go fast, to add new products? And we think we're doing a small piece of that by standardizing some rules.
What's great about this whole conversation is, whether we're talking about compliance and fraud and the IT side of that, or whether we're looking at marketing and and compliance and all that stuff,
the ops.
At the end of the day, hell, man, the point is to make money, right? That's why we're marketing products. And so when we're talking about, can we do this in a compliant way, and can we do this with modern technology and stay within our lane, right? So that we stay out of trouble. And that is such a cool spot. My hats off to you guys, man, to be able to really play in there in a space where you're saying, look, I can show you how to make a lot of money. I can show you how to stay out of trouble. Now, he's not over here dealing with fraud and cards and that kind of thing. It's just the marketing side of this that they're talking about. And so what we do is we sit and talk to people about, fraud at the card level. We're going to talk about IT compliance. And then today we're talking about marketing compliance, right? Compliance. It's the same story all over again. But when we get back to where we're trying to run an organization, whether it's marketing, whether it's compliance, whatever it is, it's about making money, man. And if you can't do that and your compliance burden makes it impossible, you're not going to win. And so you've got to find companies like PerformLine that can come in here and say, we've got this in an ROI format. So tell me a little bit, how do you do that where you can improve your ROI and still stay within everybody's lane?
Yeah, I love that. And our best customers are the ones that really see their role as being a great partner to the business, right? Our best customers in the compliance department, chief compliance officers, director of compliance, they get out of bed thinking, how can I be a great partner to the business, right? They realize that. And maybe if you think a little bit about our background, you kind of, like we didn't, as small children, we didn't dream of being compliance experts, right? We were about driving business, and then we found this opportunity. So we're very much driven by how do we add speed to this problem, but protect the downside risk. So I think so more specifically to your question, I think ROI, we demonstrate ROI in a couple of ways. So first is the most obvious. Like we hope that we can help you avoid an examination or a fine or a bad headline, right? And ultimately a settlement that will cost you money. And in today's market, where budgets are a lot tighter, and maybe if you're a fintech, you're not so sure when that D round of funding is coming from. If you got a $10 million fine in there, a negative surprise, that certainly changes your plan. So first and foremost, we want to deliver on that. The second piece of the ROI is we make your people more efficient. We let them tell data-driven stories. So they're going from spot checking and manual review or stare and compare to having 100% coverage that's more accurate because it's technology driven, right? People have bad days, they get tired after lunch, they get sick. If the algorithms are pretty consistent and really accurate. So we make the existing people better. We don't take their jobs away. That's not what this is about. This is about empowering the compliance teams to have a day-to-day dashboard that helps them do their job better. And why shouldn't they, right? Marketing has had Marketo and HubSpot. Sales has had Salesforce and SalesLoft and all these other tools. And we see our big opportunity to be the day-to-day dashboard of the sales and marketing compliance team.
That's great. I love it. I love it. So, all right, I'm thinking through kind of that journey we talked about, working through the different parties. It seems to me, if I'm sitting in your shoes, you're probably sitting there thinking, why don't the BaaS banks that have adopted you, right? Why don't they almost make that a forcing factor for the programs? That way they could systematize across the whole. Am I crazy? Is everybody winking at me?
That's the first guy to think of.
I like that go the market plan.
It makes a lot of sense to me.
He's like, great idea.
Yeah. No, we do see that dynamic in play. Some of our customers will actually require it of their partners so they can have a real collaborative relationship and an apples to apples, whenever there's a potential issue. Others might encourage it, but not want to necessarily go that kind of last mile of requiring it. And then this new, what's that?
I mean, just the concept as a whole. If you think about, I think you made a great point earlier about scale and people. There's a lot of BaaS banks, and I'm actually a fan of this, right? They've got 2 or 3 programs. It's something to make up that little extra that they needed to keep going, and they stay a small community bank, but do something off the edge. Cool. For the much more focused BaaS banks that want to scale and run many programs, when your fintechs are showing up with a hodgepodge of solutions, right? Whether we're talking about core ledgers, we're talking about payments, right? I mean, anything all of a sudden it gets real messy, right? Yeah. And so we're starting to feel this idea of requiring, right? Or strongly considering.
You're not building, you're integrating.
Right. And so I don't think that a lot of BaaS banks want to be an integrator aggregator, right? And likely even the integrator aggregators are struggling with that problem, right? And so I see the theme.
Yeah, one of the things that's really cool is when we see our customers using us in the onboarding process or the decision process. Hey, we're considering this fintech partner, or we're considering this publisher, right? And they'll run the websites through the platform, or they'll say, hey, we want 100 of your last call recordings, and we will be not necessarily the only dimension, but one of the dimensions in their decision process. How did they score against our PerformLine rule set? Was it 90%? Cool, we can work with that and coach them up. Or did they score a 10 out of 100? And you know what? Like, this is going to take a little more diligence.
Right. That's great.
No, this is great, man. And one of the things like in the BaaS Association that we're noticing all over the place is companies pouring in, because everybody's got this same problem of trying to look the way. Let me just cut the Band-Aid, sure. Right? Okay, guys, this is how this ought to work. The BaaS bank should be the employer of the technology. And like you said, whether the word forced, I'm not sure if I like that word, but encourage to go through its fintech programs, right? Yeah. And in the places where it's appropriate, in certain verticals or channels where it makes sense to do that. But overall, as a blanket statement that's kind of just high level, you should probably have things at your institution that are employed throughout all of the fintech brands, and have a uniformity in there, whether that be compliance or whether that be technology and different things that you're trying to employ.
Well, it's the rub, right?
What we've had in the past was guy walks in, shows up and says, hey, I'm with this company. I don't want to use, words, names and brands, and the next guy comes up and says, we do the same thing, but we're with a different company and a different brand. And so each fintech guy shows up and there's 17 different things that I've got to integrate to as a BaaS bank.
Well, and then manage.
Exactly. And it makes my cost as a BaaS bank so much higher.
Which increases
your cost. Of course, the other idea is, why don't we just have one? Well, that's a hacker's dream, and that's not a good thing either. And we want to encourage, technology changes and all that cool stuff that goes on here. But we've got to maintain that visibility for the regulator to be able to see all the way to the end consumer and from where the starting point is, and then employ best tactics along the way. The good news is you got companies like PerformLine.
I was going to say,
you've got companies out there that are doing these really unique, neat things right now.
Yep.
And as we kind of lean into the future of how it ought to be, we've got a reset moment that's really nice.
That's what I feel. And I'd love to see if you feel the same way, Alex, but I feel like the BaaS space as a whole, what was actually fun and exciting years ago. The Wild West, granted. Uh,
Build
as-
their own APIs.
right. It was cool, man. But things have started to get a lot more streamlined. There's a lot more communication. Obviously, Bass Association helping out there. But I'm starting to see things mature, right? And I think you guys are a great example of that, right? There's starting to be household names and brands and people that do a great job, right? And both fintechs and banks are starting to speak the same language, right? And actually have some of the same networks of people, which is shocking. If you
Yeah.
guys remember about 5 or 8 years ago, I mean, this was like different languages.
Yeah, is that true? Like, is it really surprising from where you guys sit to hear, a fintech and a traditional community bank be connected on a lot of different levels and work with the same vendors? Yeah.
Yeah, we're starting to see it, man. And I think what's happened is, I mean, we all remember the early days of crypto and a lot of the talent flows, right? People going to cool blockchain companies, et cetera. We've seen kind of the same thing in the BaaS space where, look, if I'm a cool fintech company, I would love to pick up somebody for something like compliance or reg. I'd love to pick them up from a BaaS bank.
Yeah.
Same thing. If I'm a BaaS bank, maybe I want to pull somebody from a cool fintech. And so I think people have jumped around enough that there's a lot of the same network. And it's
That's
cool,
true.
right? You get a number of those people that you're friends with, and I'm like, wow, the world is starting to become one. It's cool.
Yeah, so in one way, everything's getting bigger and more organized and less Wild West. But in another way, like the community is getting tighter because we're seeing the same experts kind of show up in different places every few years, and everyone is kind of rowing in the same direction. So
And now here comes the regulation, right? It's kind of funny, you would expect some of this. And I think that puts you guys in a great spot, right? A necessary spot.
Good point.
thank you. And we feel lucky that we were able to get the trust of a lot of banks that are in your network, that are part of BaaS. I mean, these are banks that are 100 years old, 150 years old, and they've been serving communities consistently and honorably for such a long time. So whenever we add a community bank, I think we take it really personal because it's not easy to win that trust. And I'm sure there's been a lot of technology vendors that maybe we're pushing vaporware, and maybe they've been burned in the past, not necessarily in our space, but over the years. So we know that, it's not easy to get budget in banks like that. So when we take our responsibility seriously, and we're really, really pleased and honored to be considered a trusted partner.
I love it.
That's great.
And it's appreciated, man. I think from the fintech side too, what you guys do to help that actually brings both parties together, makes both sides more profitable and more compliant, which is better for the consumer and everybody wins. So thank you as well.
It's really hard, I think, for people to completely grasp how big a word trust is in community banking. Because like you said, and the vendors, a lot of them will be honest and tell you, yeah, we probably shouldn't have said that, or yeah, we shouldn't have done that. And they've led themselves into an untrusted position. And when you can build that over time, that's really something important. And the bankers listen to that. I want to do something here real quick.
Sure.
A personal invitation. I want you guys to come to the roundup. So the FedFizz roundup, it's November 1st through the 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
We bring in the most innovative players in the marketplace into one room. It's a big room. It's a small room, but it's a big room. And you're exactly the kind of player we'd like to have in that room.
It'd be great, man.
Gladly accepted. Thank you very much. I will be there. We would love to take part of that. Sounds amazing.
We get to go to Lukenbach. We have barbecue. It's a blast, man.
The Bellamy brothers last year.
Yeah, the Bellamy brothers were great.
You got me at Lukenbach. That's been on my bucket list, right?
Awesome.
Yeah, it's really neat when you get to see how this works and get everybody together, because just like you, these are not, 13 levels deep in the company. These are the C-suite people that are there as like topical experts. And man, the bankers really love that. And everybody learns and everybody works together, and you'll make new partnerships as well.
It was the largest gathering of BaaS banks ever last year.
We're trying to
kind of fun, man.
The innovation in our industry needed a little place to do that.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen the power of that. So a couple different ways we try and kind of prove that trust. So we do every quarterly business review in person if we can, if our customer will have us. So I put no caps on T&E for my customer success group. I said there's no, even during COVID, if they'll have us, Maybe we'll meet outside somewhere, but we try and go see every single customer multiple times a year in person. And then the other thing, like you guys, is we started an event called Comply,
Right.
Right.
Yes. And the
where we
community.
would bring in our customer. It started as just a customer summit,
Yeah.
but then it expanded, and we had regulators talking, but also inspirational speakers like, you know, Frank Abagnale, the guy from Catch Me If You Can.
I
You're going to
love
be
that.
on the Comply
I
event,
love that
right?
guy. Yeah, that guy's great.
Yeah. So the power of community is so strong, and that's what makes it fun for me, and I think fun for our team is the personal relationships.
I love it. Awesome, man. Well, thanks a bunch. I had a blast. This is such a cool topic too, man. I think something that's it's expansive. It touches a lot of important topics. You guys are, I mean, talk about doing a great job, man. So congrats, right? I think it's awesome. You guys are doing important work. So we appreciate you being with us.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited just to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm super excited to be invited on this and to build a relationship with you guys and the Bass Association. And you guys are doing awesome. So keep doing this.
All right, man. We will.
Okay.
Take it easy.
Let's
Bye-bye.
take it out.
Thank you.